Hey everyone, I'm Julian, and this is the Inside Scoop podcast. It's been a while since I get to see you guys, and it's a pretty good time of season. It's the wrap up of the boys' regular high school hockey season, and now we have some sections, lots of section brackets releasing just this morning. Really cool, really fun to get into it. I've got a special guest alongside John Conley, who knows so much about boys high school hockey. Welcome in. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me again, Julian. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's going to be a really fun and exciting conversation. Boys start sections this upcoming week, and then we'll possibly even leak into the next week as well with some of those big final games. But first, I wanted to do just a little warm up and introduction and discuss Mr. Hockey with you for a little bit, John. One name I wanted to bring up and discuss that I think has had a really good season, and I wanted to hear more of your thoughts that you addressed this when we talked on the phone earlier, is Tucker Johnson of Edina, 55 points, 41 assists. He's had a great season. And he's been right up there in points with some of the best players in the state. However, I don't really know if I've heard his name being floating around a whole lot in the conversation, so I wanted to really get your take on this player.
Yeah, what a story. Tucker is the fourth of four Johnson brothers to play for Edina coach Kurt Giles. All were very good players in high school and have done well beyond. And when he was a sophomore coming off the state champion Bantam team, he did not get even one shift, if I understand correctly. I don't ever remember seeing him rostered with the varsity that season, and they would go on to win the state tournament. So there is a tough little gap in the Minnesota hockey path for some kids in those big associations if they don't get to play varsity in 10th grade. You could be a great player and just really not have a role, and that's what happened with Tucker. They won the state tournament without him, and as the next season rolled around, he had a good year as a junior, and a lot of talk preseason about how the cupboard was bare with Mason West leaving for the Fargo Force and Freddie Schneider going to the U.S. National Program, and Casey Vandertop going to play with Lincoln in the USHL, and Caleb Pitsley. That's a lot of forwards that were gone, and I kept telling people they're going to be all right because they still have a number of pieces from the state Bantam team, and Tucker Johnson is one of those. And you mentioned just blowout year, more than 2 points per game, outscoring some players that entered the season with more hype, and one of the leading scorers. So I see him as a finalist. Probably not enough to win because there were some top players on top teams that also had blowout years. But really a tip of the cap, and yet another reminder to all the kids that are younger. Just keep working hard and be prepared when you get your opportunity, because if you take advantage of it, everybody notices.
Yeah, well said, John. One player, too, I wanted to highlight that I think will personally win Mr. Hockey. I mean, it's really hard. I think there's not, in my opinion, a real clear-cut favorite, but I will go with Cole Brownshausen of St. Thomas Academy, 61 points this year, leading the Cadets to a team who's been pretty much inside the top five, I would say, for boys AA teams. I know they play a Metro East schedule, and there's a handful of teams they play where they're big blowouts, and that's really going to pad his stats. But I think when you look at the production of his top line, they wouldn't be where they are now, I believe, without him. So he's going to be my Mr. Hockey choice if I had to pick one right now. And I'll leave the floor to you, John, for your Mr. Hockey favorite.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's always wonder. It's obvious to look at the top players in the top teams, but then when you look at top players on other teams, and there was a run not long ago, I think it just ended, where 4 out of 5 years it was a player from northern Minnesota, and they just won't play the same schedule consistency that you get in the Lake Conference or some of the teams from other Metro conferences that schedule heavy in non-action. St. Thomas, a week ago, they had 144 goals. He does have, for the season, 61 points. How do you compare that, with Tucker Johnson, who played in a team that didn't score as much and had a higher percentage and was only a couple points behind? It's hard to know what the voters will say. Tyden Bergeson had a big year, and is on Moorhead, defending state champions on his own team. There's a defenseman, Mickelson, 53 points. So those are some questions there. If it's not Bronshausen, I would say one of the players from Moorhead out of Double A. I don't think, Cheslock gets more votes than Bronshausen, but I do wonder what happens with someone out of Class A that had big numbers. Anthony Yerk said the team scored probably 200 goals. He had 96 points for International Falls. Probably not enough of a schedule strength there, but it's possible that some attention could be given to some other excellent players with Class A schedules. Joe Erickson, 59 points. Tate Swanson, 60 points. In the end, I think, 3-horse race between Cole, Bronshausen, and the two players from Moorhead. But history has shown I'm pretty good at predicting what will happen when these teams play each other, and really not good at predicting what other people will do when it comes to voting for postseason awards. It's just not my forte. I think I put too much stock in what happens during the season, and it helps for the voting that you start the season as a candidate. I think the same could be said for the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think players who get that attention preseason typically are the ones who end up winning it. It really helps their case. And then for Reed Larson, I got to say, I know last year Nolan Gertis from Rogers won the Reed Larson Award. I got to see Mickelson play once this season, and I see a lot of Gertis in his game, but in some ways I actually think he might be a better goal scorer. So for me, he would be, if he doesn't win Mr. Hockey, which I think he has a chance to do so, he would be my Reed Larson Award finalist. I know there's a lot of great defensemen out of Minnetonka, out of Rogers, who have a good handful as well, who I think will be in the tops of the races. But Mickelson, just with his offensive production and for how successful Moorhead has been this season as well, I think he will win the Reed Larson Award. That would be my prediction.
Yeah, I think it's an obvious choice, and I don't think it's as close as last year. Love Nolan Gertis's game, but it really was a coin toss in my mind with Jake Toll, also, who had an unbelievable year and is doing well post-high school. Out of Roger. Jake, whatever the younger Toll brother is.
Joshua Pohl from Rosemount, right?
Was it Josh last year? Jake's the older?
There's Josh Toll. Yeah,
so,
Josh Toll.
Apologies, Eric. You can keep your son straight. I can't. This year, I just don't see a second candidate that has as easy of a time getting the votes. What's the knock against Mickelson? There is none. He came back for his high school season, had a great year, and Moorhead's been a top team throughout, and he put up a ton of points, and he's going to do well post-high school. It's kind of everything that the voters typically look for, and, I'll be curious who the final 10 are, because I think that'll pick up all the other names of players that I think had great senior years, but I just don't see anyone that'll challenge. I'll give him the award right now, but I do mention I'm not very good at predicting what voters will do when it comes to postseason accolades.
I think you should feel pretty confident in this one. I think I feel really confident that Mickelson will win it. For the sake of time, we have 8 sections to get through. And I know, John, we're a little teed up for time, so I really do want to move into now our section preview. 8 AA sections we're going to go over. We're going to list our champions who we predict will win the section this season. There's definitely some sections who have some who are a little bit more competitive than others. But then also I do want to highlight each of us, 1 to 2 players from a section really to look out for, to have big performances this postseason. I'm going to get us started from the bottom up. We're going to go 1 AA. My section champ will be, again, I'm going to go with Lakeville South, with the runner-up, though, being Farmington, a team who had a really nice year and split the season series with Lakeville South. However, I know Farmington did lose their last 4 games to end the regular season, which is never really a great sign heading into the postseason. And for Lakeville South, I know they pretty much had a 500 record, but they play such a tough schedule. And then one player to really look out for, Carter Ernst, the St. Thomas commit for Lakeville South. He was their leading point scorer, and I think he was a player who decided, late in the preseason to return and could have gone on to play juniors, and he's had a successful year for the Cougars. So that's going to be my pick, Lakeville South, representing Section 1AA.
It'll be an interesting section. I haven't seen the seeds yet for 1AA. I assume there's a lot of question as to who gets the top, and Farmington probably slid with that late closeout that you mentioned, not winning in the last couple of weeks. But Lakeville North had better results, I think, than the record would indicate when they play teams like Farmington and Lakeville South. And Lakeville South is around 500, like you said. I saw them look quite good at times this year. Did happen to see them a few. And my pick will be Lakeville South, but I won't be surprised if either Farmington or Lakeville North bumps them off. Correct me if I'm wrong, I just don't see that part of the state much. I think Farmington has a lot of very good young players, and even without a trip to the state tournament, it probably bodes well for them for the future. And a lot of people have been looking for new blood from Section 1AA. If they're not going to put Shakopee and Prior Lake down there, it'd be great to see Farmington bubble up and make it to where it's not almost always a team from Lakeville.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree. I find myself kind of rooting for Farmington in the postseason this year. I actually just met their head coach on Friday and got to do a little team feature for work with them, and really love what they have going. I really love what the coach had to say, and we had a really good chat afterwards as well. So I definitely will be rooting for them this postseason, and who knows, maybe they could pull it off. But like you said, they are still a very young team and not as established as Lakeville South. So I think we both agree there, Lakeville South as our section champs. We're going to move on to Section 2AA. Ooh, this is going to be interesting. It's going to be tough. I feel like this section has been the most inconsistent in terms of teams making it out. I mean, it seems like every year we're getting someone new. You had
five public schools in 5 years: Chanhassen, Prior Lake, Shakopee, Eden Prairie, and Minnetonka. So it's quite a run, to your point.
Yeah, it's really cool to see that. Again, it seems like every year it's someone different. I think this year the favorite is Minnetonka. They do earn the 1 seed. Playing a late conference schedule is great. They play a very tough non-conference schedule as well. Now, to end the regular season, they don't have a single player over 30 points, which I thought was interesting. They're pretty much just filled with a bunch of really solid really solid forwards and defensemen. And it's difficult to get points when you play such a strong schedule. Their top guys are still averaging a point per game, which I think is still impressive in itself. Shakopee gets the 2 seed, which I think was appropriate. Followed by Chanhassen at the 3, and then Eden Prairie at the 4. I was kind of hoping that Eden Prairie-Minnetonka matchup potentially in the semis would be more intriguing, but then I looked at their regular season history this year, and Minnetonka beat them up pretty good. But one player to keep an eye out on the postseason is the freshman R.J. Thompson for the Eagles. He finished the year with 21 goals, 22 assists, so 43 total points for the freshman. Another player who had a great year for Shakopee, Cooper Siegert, 19 goals, 19 assists for the Sabres. Shakopee made the state tournament for the first time since they were in AA a season ago. And they did lose a lot of talent from last year's squad, and I think Minnetonka only got better and gained more experience, so that's why I will go with them as my section champ. Plus, being in the top 3 teams pretty much all season for boys AA. They've been really consistent with only a couple of tough losses, and they had that one bad game against Rogers, which is a whole nother conversation. However, my runner-up will be Shakopee. I think they can get past. An interesting matchup, though. They play Bloomington Jefferson in the quarterfinals, and Jefferson had a really good year. But I think they can get it past them, and then whoever wins, if Chanhassen, and then Minnetonka, I think they should have no problem making it to the section final. And Minnetonka, when they played Shakopee, had a pretty convincing win past the Sabres. It was early on this season, but it was 3-0, and I know they outshot them, I want to say, by 20 or 25 shots. So I think Minnetonka, assuming nothing drastic happens, I think they will make it out of the section as champs.
Yeah, Section 2, I think, has some of the most interesting quarterfinal matchups. You mentioned Jeffy, great year for them. They really did surprise a lot of people with winning the games they should. And, could they throw a wrench in the quarterfinal? It'll be interesting to see, but they will be an underdog. A couple great matchups. Chan plays the FAM. The two are tenants of the same building. They use different sheets at the Victoria Rec Center. And what a recovery year for Chanhassen. Runners-up 2 years ago, almost won the state tournament. And last year was a trough as they rebuilt. And I think surprised a lot of people. They were the winners of the Metro West section, ahead of teams like Benilde St. Margaret's. So great year for Chanhassen, and they'll play the FAM and 3-6 game, and then 4-5 Eden Prairie, Briar Lake. And unlike you, I think if Eden Prairie has a semifinal matchup with Minnetonka, the number 1 seed, Eden Prairie's good results this year have been surprisingly good. They haven't been consistently there, but when they've had strong goaltending, they have been in games late or even won against teams that have had much better years. So I'm looking forward to it. I think they've got the best quarterfinals, maybe tied with a couple other sections, but certainly very interesting section play to watch. And yeah, on paper, Shakopee, Minnetonka at the end. They are the favorites. And can Shakopee get back? I think it's one of the more anonymous top 5 seasons, 21-4, whatever the record was, because they play in a very large conference and have a lot of conference obligations in the South Suburban. And that's a league that doesn't get as much attention as the Lake or some of the others. You look at teams from other leagues, and they have a lot of discretionary games where they get to go schedule each other. So everybody plays Moorhead and everybody plays St. Thomas, et cetera, out of the top teams, but not so much with Shakopee. So I'm curious at the end. I think it's close to a coin toss. I don't think Minnetonka is a perfect team. I think we have more parity across the top 5 to 7 teams than we've seen in some past years where there were a clear, 2, 3, 4 teams that are head and shoulders above the next rung.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And with, just to circle back on the Eden Prairie take, assuming, again, they could even get past Prior Lake, there's no guarantees there. I got to see them play once. I mean, they could score the puck for sure, but their goaltending has been the issue. Like you said, if they can have a goalie who has a really good game, they could definitely pull off an upset. However, Minnetonka, I just look at the matchups, and Minnetonka has really played well against the Eagles. Or if they play Prior Lake, I think that would be big for them. And Chan, I mean, Holy Fam has had a decent year. I know they started out tough, but that's no guarantee that Chanhassen makes it out of that game. I like Shakopee.
That'll be a great game. That'll be a great game.
All of the games, and even Bloomington Jefferson, I seriously think could give Shakopee, an early run for their money. However, one thing to note, Shakopee, I know they maybe don't have the best quality of wins. They do have head-to-head victories, though, past number 1 and number 2 in Class A, and Hibbing Chisholm and Hermantown as well. So I know that they can beat some really impressive teams. But Minnetonka, I think ultimately they're going to be the favorite to win it, and earning the number 1 seed rightfully so will give them perhaps the easiest path to the section final. It should be a really competitive section, along with maybe Section 6 for some of the best quarterfinal games. Now I want to go to Section 3 AA. Now go back to the St. Paul side of the Metro. I know I've been seeing a little controversy on Twitter X this morning about this seeding. Rosemount earns the number 1 seed in Section 3 AA, followed by St. Thomas Academy at the 2, Cretan Durham Hall at the 3, and then Egan at the 4. I got to say, I think it's interesting. I know St. Thomas Academy is probably going to be ranked ahead of Rosemount in people's rankings. I know they have some better quality wins. However, when I look at section games that St. Thomas has, they have one win past Cretin. They beat Eastview once, but that's really it. They don't really play a lot of Section 3 AA opponents. Neither does Cretin-Durham Hall as much. And then Rosemount, I know they've never played the Cadets or the Raiders head-to-head, but they do have a lot of other wins past Eastview, past Egan, past Apple Valley, Burnsville. So I think that's the reason why the coaches decided and voted for Rosemount overall at the number 1 seed, which I think is definitely a breath of fresh air for the Irish, wanting, it's been, I don't know if they've ever made the state tournament, or at least not in recent history. So I think for them, they ultimately have a nice path to the section final, and knowing that they'll have to play either the Raiders or the Cadets in the section final, or in the section final. If you're the Cadets, you probably feel a little bit snubbed, knowing that, okay, it's likely you'll have to play your Catholic school rival in Cretin-Durham Hall in the semifinals, and those two teams have had some really good games over the years, whether it's been in the regular season or in sections. The Cadets have the 5-3 head-to-head win over them overall this year. With my section champ, though, I am going to go with the Cadets. They have really played well ever since that holiday tournament down in Prior Lake. I know they lost to Moorhead, and then literally a full week later, they go and tie the Spuds. And then I know they have a head-to-head win over Edina. They just finished their season demolishing a good Hill Murray team. And again, you have that Mr. Hockey front runner in Cole Brownshausen. Maverick McKinnon, by the way, 60 points as well, topping his 50-point 8th grade season now as a freshman, up to 60. And they've got some other players. Will Mikan, who's a part of that line as a sophomore, has been impressive. And then how about Owen Ryan at net? I know we haven't really talked a whole lot about goalies. As a true freshman, 14-4-2 record, 1.44 goals allowed per game, a .947 save percentage. I mean, he has had some really intriguing numbers for the 14-year-old. And then one other player I do want to shout out as well. I actually got to interview him on Friday. The senior captain for Rosemount, Sherman, who had a really nice year, led them in goals, 17, 32 points overall. I like it to be St. Thomas and Rosemount in the section final. However, I think the Cadets' strength of schedule is going to benefit them a little bit more in this game. So I am going to take St. Thomas Academy to go to St. Paul this season out of Section 3 AA.
Yeah, absolute bombshell this morning. It was a shocker to me that the number 1 seed in Section 3 went to Rosemount, but I'm very happy about it. Shout out Ricky Sainty. This is what I've been waiting for going back several years. I remember being at Braemar, St. Thomas and Burnsville. As a minute left, it was 1-0, and just pulling so hard for Burnsville, really wanting a public school to get through Section 3. And it seems like every year since, there's been a very good Rosemount team, but not quite able to climb over the mountain. 2026 sees the path cleared. This is great news for Rosemount. Can they reach the section final? They have to get through Apple Valley, Burnsville, Egan, and Eastview. And if they do that, we're moving to the Lee and Penny Anderson Arena with Section 3 AA final. And it sets up what is a rematch from last year's, the Friday we'll never forget. It was Section 3 and 4 concurrent games going double overtime. And it ended up St. Thomas beat Cretin-Durham Hall. And now they won't meet in the section final. They'll meet most likely in the section semi on 20th, which is Friday. So that's a big game. It's the late start Friday nights. That one's not going to end until close to 11 o'clock. And it's pretty exciting to see that type of game. Cretin was a little bit of a head fake. They had 3 players that stayed in junior hockey and came out of the gates and did not do well, but it only took maybe a month before they got things settled and have really put up some good results throughout the season. Johnny Bladeau, one of the more exciting young players in the state. I don't see him enough, but I know Cretin is very capable of getting through, and it's a gauntlet. They'll have to beat St. Thomas in the semi and most likely Rosemount in the final. But if we're picking teams, Julian, I've waited for this for many years. I am going to go with Rosemount. I've wanted to see public school crack that stranglehold for Section 3 AA. I think it's been a long, I can't remember. I know Cretin was in Section 6 and they moved into Section 3, and just seems like it's been since St. Thomas moved from A to AA. It's been the domain of private schools, and I'd love to see Rosemont get through. So should be a good section with huge game on Friday night in Bloomington if it holds true to seed.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see Rosemont make it too. I was also there on Friday. Got to meet both Ricky Saney Jr. and Senior. Got to interview Cade. They're a really fun program. They like to really let loose as a team. However, they take the big moments very serious when they need to be. Yeah, the culture there was great. I mean, it was unlike almost any other team I've seen so far. Just seeing them not in game mode, right, and just kind of seeing them in that practice mode. So I find myself rooting for them for sure. But ultimately, I think it's going to remain private schools dominating. And I got to go with the Cadets. They've been one of the hottest teams in the state of Minnesota since the 2026 season, or the 2026 calendar year turnaround. But I think it should be really intriguing overall. Top three heavy. But regardless, whoever comes out of that section between those three squads will be a pretty competitive team at the state tournament level. Going to 4AA now, which that section bracket is released. Pulling up my phone here. So Hill Murray wins the number 1 seed. They're gifted that, followed by Stillwater at the 2 seed. White Bear Lake finishes at 3, and then Eastridge at 4. Gentry, Roseville at 5 and 6. Woodbury, Mounds View 7 and 8. This section, I mean, I feel like it's always kind of been Hill Murray, White Bear Lake. Stillwater makes it out last year and makes the state championship game and has just an outstanding performance against Moorhead in the championship game. I know Stillwater, a team that lost a lot from last year's squad, and then they have a pretty surprising good start to the year. I know they beat St. Thomas Academy. Yeah, they
really strong.
They were impressive, and then I felt like as the season went on, they really kind of dropped back into where I think we expected them to be at, but they still land at the number 2 seed. Most likely will play White Bear Lake in the semifinal, which they beat them both times this season in head-to-head play. Hill Murray with the 1, I think they should have no problem making it to the semis. An emerging Eastridge squad at the 4 seed, who's had some good wins. And I want to say Eastridge, gosh, I'm forgetting, but Eastridge just had a really nice head-to-head win.
I'm glad you mentioned Eastridge. I did make a note that for a dark horse across the state, if I had to pick one team, Section 4 seems a little bit wide open if Hill Murray doesn't have a great run. They've shown that they are capable at times of stubbing their toe. They're very, very young. I think their top 6 defense, only 1 is a junior or senior. 5 are 9th and 10th graders. So Eastridge, and I believe Rex and Walls has had a great year for them. Wes Walls' son. They're a team that, could they bump through the section and make it? Probably. It'd be fun to see. Hill Murray's a huge favorite on paper, but if a final game against Stillwater White Bear happens, both of those would have a chance to pull the upset. Those are huge rivalry games. So pretty fun section on paper. I like Hill Murray, but I am glad you mentioned Eastridge because I think it's a good story. And again, it's easy to pull for these public schools that represent a community and usually have to overcome the loss of some players that choose to go a different route.
Yeah, for sure. I think this section is pretty wide open. Hill Murray on paper is the favorite. They were my preseason, I want to say, number 2 team in the state and maybe didn't really have that season, but still has been inside the top 10 for all of this regular year. 17-6-2 record overall. One player I do want to shout out that's had a really good season, especially these last few games, Landon Samper, the sophomore, who's second in points, 16 goals, 18 assists, has had a really good year. And then another player, too, out of Stillwater, who expect him to take on a big role for the Ponies, Tyson Miller, the junior, 23 goals, 44 total points overall. has had a monster year considering I don't even think he had much of a role, if any, on last year's team.
No, they were pretty much all seniors. I mean,
Yeah.
wasn't a lot of room.
Yeah, there's not much for the youngster. Only a junior this year, so would be eligible to return next year for his senior year. I'm going to go with the champs, Hill Murray, knowing that there's not even a guarantee they really could even make it to the section final if Eastridge were to pull off a miraculous upset. And Stillwater, too. I think it's tough because I look at the big three in this section. None of these teams really finished the last couple of weeks really on a high note. I know Hill Murray lost 3 of their last 4 games. Granted, that's to Maple Grove. That's to St. Thomas Academy. And then the third team, Moorhead, on the road in overtime. But it's still losses, so it's really going to be hard to say. I have Stillwater as my runner-up, but I will go with Hill Murray representing Section 4 AA this season. And then we're going to move now to Section 5 AA. This bracket just got released on Twitter, John. Maple Grove gets the number 1 seed out of the Lake Conference, formerly the Northwest Suburban. Blaine with the 2 seed. And then Centennial will be at 3. Totino Grace earns the 4. They'll have a good quarterfinal matchup with Andover at the 5. And then to round out 6 through 8, Champlain Park, Spring Lake Park, Coon Rapids, and then Anoka. And I've got the privilege to call a lot of Maple Grove boys hockey this season. I've seen them many, many times this year being on the call for that. And they're a fantastic team. One thing I think that's just really interesting about their record, now they've had a great season, 15-8-2, and being a part of the Lake Conference, playing Edina and Minnetonka and Eden Prairie twice. That's never easy. I think they actually played Edina 3 times because then they played in the Turkey Trot in November. But they had so many overtime wins this year. I want to say at one point they had 6. They might even have 7 OT wins this year. They've had a lot of really close games with their victories. And even with Hill Murray, 1-0.
Scoreless, 0-0.
Right?
They won in overtime. You're
Yep.
right.
And I know they've had they beat St. Thomas Academy in overtime. I remember I was there for that. But then they've also had some close but competitive losses. They played Edina close both times. In Lake Conference play, once Edina was fully loaded, they had just a 2-0 loss to Minnetonka, so they kept it close there. They had an overtime loss to Eden Prairie, so a lot of their losses have come pretty close. And this is a team that I look at, like, their floor and their ceiling is like really high and really low. I could see Maple Grove going out in the semifinals and dropping one to an Andover or Totino Grace, which, by the way, they played Andover very close this year. They tied once, and then they have 1 overtime win past the Huskies. So that would be an interesting matchup if they were to meet in the semifinals. Or I could literally see Maple Grove somehow make it to like the state semifinals and play really competitive. That's just how good they are. But it's also I'm a little uncertain with how I really feel about them. One player to watch out for, junior forward Wyatt Kuznick, led them in points this year, 20 goals, 19 assists. He had a really good year for the Crimson. They're going to be my section favorite just because they have overall played pretty good in the section. But I also think this could be wide open too. They tied Blaine earlier, and if they were to meet in the section final, that could be a really close game. They played Andover close. It's really unsure. And then the final player I do want to mention too, who could have a potential really big quarterfinal game, would be Camden Langfeld for Andover. 48 points with 32 assists. He had a monster year, and I believe might just be a sophomore, if I'm not mistaken, or a junior. I know he has at least one more year left in him for a struggling Andover team. But like we saw last year, before they moved sections, they had a tough record, and they didn't win a lot of games, but they still made it out of Section 7 AA and reached the state tournament.
Yeah, this is an interesting section because, as you mentioned, Maple Grove seems to have a lot of close games against everybody. And I put out a tweet maybe 2 weeks ago about teams that were capable of winning 6 in a row to win state, and they weren't on the list. I think eventually that's going to trip up with them if they're in coin toss games with their opponents. So with that as a backdrop, I think it's pretty wide open, and I really like the opportunity for Blaine or Centennial to get through. They have to be excited about how they're playing at the end. It's a Blaine team that had a very good record last year and a lot of returners this year. They didn't have the most consistent results this season, but they have a clean slate. Everybody's 0-0 and ready to go. They should win their first round game and then probably run into Centennial. I say probably because Champlin Park threw a scare at Holy Angels yesterday. That game went to overtime.
Oh, yeah.
So Centennial, Champlin Park. And that's why I think this section's on my list of most wide open and best quarters. Totino beat Andover during the regular season. And as you mentioned, Andover went to the state tournament last year. And, they've had some results that were okay this year where you'd say on a good day, what happens. So I think there's a lot of question marks here. Maple Grove's certainly the favorite on paper, but I'll put it at a 50-50 proposition, Maple Grove and then the field. And if you open up that field discussion, could be Blaine, could be Centennial, could be Andover. Maybe Totino Grace catches fire. They've had some good results. They play some Class A teams that are pretty good. I'm trying to remember what happened with Sartell and
they lost to
Monticello.
Sartell.
But they beat Monticello.
They did beat Monticello
For the second year in a row. Anyway, this should be an interesting section, and they will play the section championship game at the rink in Elk River, but Elk River's not in the sections.
Yeah.
Interesting oddity.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Furniture and Things Arena, it's a pretty big rink. They've got a double-sided bleachers, so I think in that neck of the woods, I think it's the biggest arena that is around. But yeah,
it
Elk
is.
River. Not
when you say that neck of the woods, why aren't they in the region? Interesting oddity. Moving on.
Section 6 AA. Speaking of teams who are not necessarily in the neck of the woods of some of these others, this section brought in Rogers and Buffalo from last year. Buffalo used to be in Section 8. Rogers was in Section 5. I think if Rogers was in Section 5 this year, they'd be a pretty clear favorite to win it. But they're not. However, they do earn the number 1 seed in 6AA as they just storm through the final couple weeks of the regular season. A 9-1 win past Centennial. They go and beat Moorhead 5-3. They clobber Minnetonka despite being outshot in shots and goals, scoring 4 goals in 4 minutes, a 6-1 victory there. Most likely they're the number 1 overall team heading into sections. And then they kind of had an interesting game in the final regular season, 3-1 over Armstrong Cooper, which I think reality maybe settled in a little bit for them. Regardless, they go with the number 1 seed, followed by Edina at the 2 seed. Holy Angels will get the 3 seed, and then Wayzata at the 4 seed, who actually just beat Edina 4-1 to end the regular year. Buffalo with the 5 seed over Benilde St. Margaret's, and then Armstrong Cooper will have another quarterfinal matchup with Edina. Maybe a little revenge tour for those who don't know. It was until the final moments in that quarterfinal game last year, and I believe as the clock was expiring, Armstrong Cooper had a shot that hit off the pipe and would have sent that game into overtime, which would have...
Yeah, I didn't see the game, but I heard crossbar in the last minute, and it was an 8-1 seed matchup.
Yeah.
So just bizarre. But credit, and they've had a good year. They have Brady Northrup with 58 points this year. So...
Yeah.
Someone that maybe isn't getting a lot of attention that went out and just had a blowout year for them. So, yeah, pretty exciting. I like seeing Rogers rewarded for closing out the end of the year and getting a top seed. They were not given an easy path because the pesky team you don't want to play is Wayzata. They're just a really tough matchup. And this was pretty bad news for Rogers, I think. And there's some familiarity there between the coaches, as Dave Brown used to be the assistant for Pat O'Leary. And on the flip side, when you go to the other side of the bracket, Catholic school matchup, Academy of Holy Angels and Benilde. Benilde has not had a good season, but they could beat Holy Angels. And I think if Edina gets through the Armstrong Cooper Wings, they've got to be pretty happy that they have an opponent, either Holy Angels or Benilde, that they think they could beat. They have more depth at Edina. And the one thing I'll say, Julian, Edina had a lot of losses this year. They were close games, but Kurt Giles has been there 23 years. In the past 3 seasons, they were runners-up, 2-1, lost to Minnetonka, won 2-1 in the final, champions over Chanhassen. And last year, third place, beating St. Thomas in the semi in the final minute. Close game with Moorhead. Came down to the end, could have gone either way. Moorhead, the eventual champions. And not all of those Edina teams were the top teams. And what you have is a coaching staff that knows what it takes in the postseason. They've been there many times before. And Edina cannot fall behind and come back like they could when they had Sammy Walker, Jet Jungles, Liam Malmquist, Demetrius Komonsi. It's just not that team. They're not going to be able to. So everything pointed to this point in the season where the goal is take care of your little assignments along the way. Let's not fall behind. And I'm going to pick Edina to get through the section. I think it's a tough matchup for Rogers against Edina in the final with a lot of pressure on them. If Rogers makes the state tournament, they are the number 1 overall seed at the XL, or the XX. But it would be a coin toss in my book in a section final, and under the bright lights at Ritter. I think there's enough remnants of the kids from the state Bantam team, some remnants from the state champion high school team 2 years ago, and they're a little bit more battle tested. So I'll take Edina as a winner in Section 6 if we're getting into predictions, but could be the best of the section final games, and it could even be the quality of a state semi or a state championship game.
For sure. Yeah, in terms of predictions, I am going to go with Edina too. I think Rogers, if they play like how they have, if they can keep that up this postseason, if they can beat a good Centennial team 9-1, if they can beat Minnetonka and Moorhead, if we get that version of Rogers, they can beat anybody, including Edina. But it's a different stage at Ritter, under the bright lights, in front of a packed barn, going up against an Edina team that just knows how to win in the big moments, and with such an experienced and iconic coaching staff behind them. And like you said, reminiscent of Bantam state champs and high school state champs. It would be a really good matchup, and like you said too, I would totally agree. This, assuming these two teams make the section final, this would be a state semi, even a state championship caliber game, and whoever wins this section will come out as a favorite to win the entire state championship, in my opinion. I would love to see Rogers, honestly, because I really like their program. However, I do go with you, and it's tough to bet against the Hornets, especially in the big game, in the big moments. So I'm going to go with Edina too. They had a really good year, also featuring one of the state's best scorers, and Bodie McConnell, who had a fantastic season for Edina this year, and I think he might have the best shot in his class, and arguably the best shot in the entire state of Minnesota.
He's been a feast or famine goal scorer, and in one game he had 5 goals, and then he had a drought, and he's been really, really prolific when he's on, and I think that's kind of indicative of the challenges that Edina's had. What separates them maybe from being a top 2 or 3 team in the state. They're kind of more settled in, at number 5 all year now. They can't outscore you, and in any of these games, do they look for someone? I remember being at Ritter last year, in Mason West and state tournament, just kept going to Mason West for the big goals. And they don't have that person clearly right now. It'd be nice if McConnell is on for the Hornets prospects. But just like Minnetonka, might just kind of be by committee. We've got to find a way to get a few goals and then keep the other team from scoring. And that 9-1 over Centennial, that's really scary. How are we going to beat those guys? Rogers beat a good team, pummeled them, running time. But one of the things about postseason, we've seen it year in, year out, is you get into the close games and they take on a different form. And games could be, nip and tuck and turn on a bounce or a special teams opportunities. So should be a fun one. And we do have one of the state's top couple teams that won't reach the state tournament. We know that already because the top two in Section 6 are really good.
Yeah. Yeah, only one of them could make it, and for all we know, too, who knows? Wayzata, never an easy out either. Moving on to the North, 7AA. Oh, my goodness. The top 5 seeds in 7. I mean, this was a mess. I don't know how you seed it. Heading into the year, I mean, yeah, it's it'd be tough to be that coaching committee and choosing that.
Do they use coach vote? I thought this might have been one of the QRFs. I can't remember.
Maybe
this was.
To my knowledge, it's the coaches who are the one. I mean, but yeah, I don't know if this section is different or not. Grand Rapids, a team that's always a favorite out of this section, finishes 12-1. But the back half of the season was definitely better for them. Rock Ridge at the 2 seed, and then you have 3, 4, and 5. I mean, you have Duluth Marshall, who has a great record on paper, but I know it seems like strength of schedule maybe was valued more in this section, because if you were to go based off a record, Duluth Marshall, a pretty clear favorite there. I know Forest Lake, a team.
Well, they ran into trouble with the head-to-head opponents. There's a reason. Duluth Marshall didn't. The games they needed to win, they didn't win when they did play in section. That's what tripped them up.
Okay, I mean that totally makes sense. Having head-to-head, I feel like is the most valued aspect of section seeding. So yeah, I don't really follow.
They lost
Marshall
4-0 to Duluth East. The last game they lost 4-0 to Duluth East. Had they won that, they were likely to be the number 1 seed. So it crumbled quickly.
Interesting.
They beat Rock Ridge earlier,
for sure.
But they lost to Grand Rapids, and you can see where it gets murky. Had they won that last game, it would have been a much different story. But wide open section.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think you literally could see whoever makes state could be probably be one of those 5 teams, one of the top 5 teams. I will say, I know,
and they'll be the 8th seed.
Yeah, for sure. They would be definitely the lowest seed out of the section. Definitely 7. Section 7 doesn't really have the strength. And then Andover, who was a part of this section, no more. Which, if they were even in this section, then you could arguably say, hey, there would be 6 potential section champion winners. It's really tough. I think it will come down to Grand Rapids and Rock Ridge. I think overall maybe they're the best talented teams, and I like the direction that Grand Rapids has been going the second half of the year. I know they really struggled to begin in November and December, but January and the first half of February they've looked a lot better. Rock Ridge I have as my runner-up, and then a player who I really want to highlight, Kaz Carlson, who is a player who potentially could be in the Mr. Hockey conversation. 45 points with 22 goals. He had a really big year for them. But overall, I mean, again, I'm just going a wild pick right here. I'm just going to go with Grand Rapids as my section representative out of 7AA.
I'm going to stick with my preseason Duluth Marshall. Why not? Whoever I pick, I've got an 80% chance of being wrong. This thing's wide open, and none of the teams distinguish themselves over the course of the last 3 months as being capable of throwing much of a wrench in once they get to the state tournament. So probably the most wide open and across the state, probably the least interesting. I mean, it's amusing, but it's like if you follow college football, getting excited about the Division II championship. It's wide open, but it's
no, it almost
a big
feels
deal
like,
for the kids in it. But beyond that, I just think its reach is limited.
I mean, it almost kind of feels to me like it's like the group of five for college football. It's almost like you're going to send a James Madison or a Tulane um, into the college football playoffs. Yeah, I don't see it working out too well once whoever comes to the Grand Casino Arena and will most likely play a team like a Minnetonka or a Moorhead or an Edina Rogers in the first round. But it should be really competitive, and we'll see. I mean, I feel like it's going to be really difficult to predict the results of this section and entirely throughout the quarters through the section championship. I think it's just there's so much up in the air out of section 7, and now I want to move on to 8 because I know you got to go, John. 8AA. This bracket came out pretty early. Moorhead with the 1 seed, which is not shocker. St. Michael Albertville does get the 2 seed despite Elk River having the head-to-head win over them, but I know Elk River then dropped a game to St. Cloud, which really shook things up. So STMA will be the 2 seed, followed by Elk River Zimmerman. They will host Roseau in the quarterfinals. And then the 4 and 5 matchup is going to be St. Cloud, who gets the 4. They will host Bemidji, which should be a pretty competitive quarterfinal game from the St. Cloud MAC arena. Roseau at the 6, they will have to come down and play Elk River. That's a pretty far drive for them. That's going to be a 5 p.m. start, by the way. And then Brainerd will come down to St. Michael to take on the Knights. And then Alexandria, the gifted, the 8th seed, to take on the number 1 Spuds. This section, I mean, I'm going to call it like I see it. Moorhead's a pretty heavy favorite. They beat up on Elk River and St. Michael Albertville pretty good. I think before his late season return, Moorhead had potential to be upset just because I know they had a lot of shaky games and some close ones to end the year. But now that Joey Cullen has returned to as a player who we weren't even expecting to co-play high school this year out of Bantams, returns. He only played 12 regular season games this year, but was very productive. 29 points, including 13 goals in 12 games played for Cullen. And then another player I do want to shout out for Elk River, Tristan Creech, the senior, with 50 points, including 18 goals. They've got a pretty good top line in Elk River. Goaltending has been a question for them. And I would really like to see Elk River and St. Michael Albertville just because those are 2 teams I have covered a lot this season. That would be a really fun section semifinal. I think Moorhead should have no problem making the section final once again. And assuming they could stay healthy, they have the goal scoring that's good enough to make it past any of these teams in 8. So I will go with the Spuds to win Section 8. However, if we're talking state tournament, I know we're not there yet, John, but I don't know. That's all I'm going to go for. I think they can win the section, but I don't know how I feel about them if they were at the state tournament this year. I don't know if they have what it takes to go back-to-back.
Least intriguing section by far for me. It's I don't know that I'll even look to see what the scores were. Moorhead has, of all the sections, by far the highest likelihood. They're the biggest favorite to reach the state tournament. And unlike you, I see them very much capable of winning the state tournament. They started out on paper, I thought they were about 4 goals better than anyone else and did not have that type of season. I think a lot of it coincided to losing just one key player that triggered a lot on the power play, and it's just been coming up huge for him all year. So with Joey Cullen back, and he came back like 100%. It's like Mario Lemieux coming back after a long hiatus always seemed to be really good. I think that they're definitely a state tournament title contender. And right now, I think even maybe like the betting favorite because they've got the highest likelihood of reaching the state tournament because there's just no one else in Section 8 that has any more than a Miracle on Ice type upset chance against a very good Moorhead team. So that's it. Appreciate the opportunity, Julian, and I'm looking forward to the 10 days of hockey that are upon us.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun next 10 days, and then, I can't wait to see what all unfolds. It's going to be, I have the feeling it's going to be a really fun postseason per usual, and good luck to all the teams this year in sections, it's a really big time for family, friends, and communities, and the coaches, and for the players mostly. So special thanks to you, John, for giving me your time this Sunday morning. And if you made it this far, we appreciate you tuning into the Inside Scoop podcast. I'm your host, Julian Lockhart, and we're going to sign off for the game. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks as always.